My hands smell of blood. Always. I'm a butcher. I cut, carve, turn flesh into product. She's a ballerina from a theater where one ticket costs my monthly salary. "Your hands are honest," she said, kissing my scars. Then she got pregnant, and he appeared. Gray-haired, wealthy, with ownership rights over her. "Tomorrow we fly to Zurich. Doctors will fix your mistake there." In the morning, I waited for them on the highway, stopped the car, beat up the guards. These honest hands were ready to kill. But when I opened the door, I understood. They broke me. The blades sank into flesh with a muted thump, slicing through fiber along the natural seam of bone. Marcus Teller worked in the half-light of the butcher shop, where the only witness to his craft was the humming fluorescent fixture overhead. Light spilled across the cutting block, turning weathered wood into a canvas of shadows and gleams. His hands moved with honed precision, not a single wasted motion, not one hesitation of the blade. The pig carcass lay before him, massive and silent. Marcus ran his fingers along the spine, feeling for the spaces between vertebrae. He could see the skeleton through the meat, understood the architecture of the body as clearly as an engineer reads a blueprint. The boning knife slid downward, separating the rib section in one long, confident stroke. Steel sang against bone, a high, clean note in the cold morning silence. The smell of blood and iron had seeped so deep into the walls it became part of the air itself. Mixed with it came ozone from the industrial freezers and the faint scent of juniper from the marinade. Marcus breathed in the blend, and it calmed him better than any prayer. Here, in this kingdom of steel and flesh, the world made sense. Each carcass was a problem with a single correct solution. Every cut brought chaos one step closer to order. Light glinted off the blade as he lifted the knife toward the magnetic strip. His arsenal hung in strict sequence, heavy cleavers on the left, flexible fillet knives on the right, honing steel in the center. Marcus ran his thumb along the edge of the boning knife, testing sharpness. The steel was cold and perfectly smooth. Flawless. He wiped the blade with a clean rag, leaving a thin crimson streak on the white cloth. The movements of his hands were unhurried, almost ritualistic. There was a meditative beauty to this process, the beauty of function stripped of all pretense. Meat doesn't deceive. Bone doesn't pretend. A knife cuts or it doesn't. There was no room here for ambiguity. The city beyond the window was beginning to wake. Through fogged glass, gray dawn light broke through, painting the industrial zone in shades of lead and rust. Marcus heard the distant roar of the first truck on the bypass. Soon, his father would arrive. The regular workday would begin. Customers would appear. But these hours before dawn belonged to him alone. He set down the knife and looked at his hands. Broad palms, marked with a web of small scars and calluses. Nails clipped short, skin roughened from constant contact with cold and steel. On his left forearm ran a long white scar, a reminder of a slipped blade at 17. Marcus absently traced his fingers along that mark. It was always colder than the rest of his skin. These hands created order from carcasses. They transformed shapeless flesh into neat, clean cuts. But tonight they would have to hold something infinitely more fragile. The stainless steel sink stood in the corner. Beneath it, a stiff brush and a bar of industrial soap. Marcus approached, turned on the faucet. The water ran ice-cold, searingly frigid. He lathered his hands, picked up the brush, and began scrubbing his skin. Dark crumbs collected under his nails, remnants of work. He scraped them out methodically, with the same focus he brought to breaking down meat. Red foam swirled down the drain. Marcus lathered his hands again, then once more. The smell of blood and iron gave way to the alkaline scent of soap. He scrubbed until his skin flushed red, until his knuckles ached from the effort. It wasn't enough to just wash away the grime. He needed to scrub off the very essence of this place, leave the butcher here in the cold shop, and become someone else, someone worthy of her. Marcus pulled the apron over his head. The white fabric was stained with brown splotches and streaks. He hung it on a hook by the wall, next to his father's. 2 aprons, 2 generations of the same trade. A simple legacy, honest and straightforward. But for Claire, it wasn't enough. He changed into dark jeans and a black t-shirt, his best clothes, pulled on the leather jacket he'd bought 3 years ago and only wore for special occasions, looked at his reflection in the tarnished mirror above the sink. A broad face with a heavy jaw, gray eyes beneath dark brows, premature silver at the temples. The face of a working man, a butcher's face. He ran his palm over the stubble, considering whether to shave. Decided against it. Too late now. The old pickup started with a low growl, the whole frame shuddering like some great beast waking from sleep. Marcus pulled out of the shop's lot onto the deserted industrial street. Gray apartment blocks stretched along the road in an endless, monotonous line. Abandoned factory buildings with shattered windows. Rusted garages. The world he'd grown up in. A world familiar and predictable. The pickup gathered speed, pushing through sparse morning traffic. Marcus crossed the bridge over the river, and the city began to change. Industrial complexes gave way to residential neighborhoods. Then came the first signs of downtown. Glass-fronted boutiques, cafes with French names, wide avenues lined with perfectly trimmed trees. The farther he drove, the more he felt like an outsider. His truck, with its peeling paint and the dent in the rear quarter panel, looked like a dinosaur among the sleek foreign cars. Marcus parked a few blocks from her building, choosing a quiet side street. He killed the engine and just sat there, listening to the ticking of the cooling motor. He looked down at his hands resting on the wheel. Even after thorough scrubbing, they remained a butcher's hands, rough, scratched, too large for this world of crystal and silk. Marcus got out of the truck and walked. His heavy work boots thudded dully on the pristine sidewalk. Elegant facades drifted past, display windows showcasing jewelry worth more than his shop. A woman in a mink coat swept by, trailing a cloud of perfume. Marcus hunched his shoulders, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets. Her building rose before him, a glass tower reaching toward the low gray sky. A uniformed doorman stood at the entrance, giving Marcus an appraising look. He rode the elevator up, watching his distorted reflection in the mirrored walls. The hallway on her floor was carpeted in plush fabric that swallowed the sound of footsteps. Marcus rang the bell, waited, listening to his own heartbeat. Claire opened the door almost immediately. She wore a simple ivory house dress, her hair gathered in a loose bun. Without stage makeup, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Honey-colored eyes met his, and a smile appeared on her face. Genuine, warm, the one he saw so rarely. "You came," she said quietly, taking his hands in hers. Her palms were small, delicate, with the long fingers of a dancer. The touch felt almost weightless, like the landing of a bird. Marcus froze, afraid to squeeze too hard and crush such fragility. "Your hands are always so cold," she smiled, rubbing his fingers. "But they're honest. I like that." He couldn't find words to answer, just let her pull him into the apartment, into this world of white light and sterile beauty. The apartment greeted him with ringing silence. A massive picture window turned the city below into a mute backdrop. White leather sofa, glass coffee table, charcoal gray carpet, everything arranged with museum precision. The air smelled of her perfume, floral and cold, like the first spring rain on funeral lilies. Marcus moved deeper inside, feeling like a bull in a china shop. Claire glided through the space with the same grace she brought to the stage, light, almost floating. She filled a kettle in the kitchen, her movements fluid and rehearsed. His gaze wandered around the room, catching on nondescript art books, on the perfect white orchid in its glass vase, and stopped at the mantel. A silver frame caught the light from the window. The photograph inside was professional. Claire, in an evening gown, pressed against a silver-haired man in an impeccable suit. She was smiling at the camera, but her smile wasn't the one he'd seen a minute ago. This was a public smile, forced and cold. And the man's hand rested on her waist, not just touching, possessing with complete certainty. Marcus felt something dark and barbed stir in his chest. He picked up the frame, the weight of the silver pleasant and solid in his palm. "Who is this?" His voice came out level, but low notes he hadn't intended crept in. Claire froze at the stove, her back tensed beneath the thin fabric of her dress. She turned, saw the frame in his hands, and for a moment her face lost all theatrical training. Fear flickered in her eyes. She approached quickly, almost snatching the photograph from his hands. Her fingers touched his for a second, ice cold, trembling. "Nobody," the words flew out too fast. "Richard Garrett. He's a patron of the theater, a benefactor. He helps with funding productions." She set the frame back on the shelf, but crookedly. The silver tilted, reflecting light at the wrong angle. Claire didn't notice, or pretended not to. Marcus watched her profile. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Her words sounded like a rehearsed line delivered on autopilot. Benefactor. Patron. Empty words hiding a truth too terrible to speak aloud. "Does he come here often?" Marcus asked. "No, almost never." "Marcus, it really doesn't matter." She turned to him, and her smile returned, but now he could see the effort behind it, could see the cracks in the porcelain mask. Marcus pulled her close, drawing her against him. She pressed into his chest, and he felt her heart hammering wildly. Too fast for someone with nothing to hide. He rested his chin on the crown of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, jasmine shampoo, and something else barely detectable. Fear. They stood like that in silence, and Marcus tried to believe everything was fine, that the man in the photograph was truly just a patron, that the hand on her waist meant nothing more than a polite gesture for the camera. "I'm pregnant," Claire whispered against his chest. The world stopped. Marcus pulled back, gripped her shoulders, looked into her face. Her eyes glistened, but he couldn't tell if it was from tears or from the light streaming through the window. "What?" "I'm pregnant," she repeated louder, but her voice shook. His heart detonated in a silent burst of joy. A child. Their child. Flesh of his flesh, blood of his blood. Proof that all of this was real, that he wasn't just some fantasy she indulged out of boredom. A bridge between their worlds, fragile but genuine. Marcus imagined their future. Not here, not in this sterile cage above the city. A simple house with hardwood floors and the smell of fresh bread, a crib by the window. Claire holding their baby, without makeup or expensive clothes, just a woman, just a mother. He smiled, wide, genuine, and his severe face transformed. "Claire, we need to get an abortion." The words fell between them like a guillotine blade. Marcus blinked. Didn't understand. Couldn't understand. "What?" "An abortion," Claire repeated, and her voice was empty, like a surgeon announcing a diagnosis. "We can't keep the baby. It's impossible." The joy drained out of him, leaving behind icy emptiness. He released his grip, stepped back, stared at her, trying to find even a trace of regret in her face, even a hint of pain. Saw only fear and steel resolve. "Why?" The word came out hoarse. "I have a contract. I can't. My career." "Your career?" Marcus felt anger rising from somewhere deep in his gut, hot and blind. "We're talking about a child. Our child." "You don't understand." Claire wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to shield her body. "It's complicated. The theater, obligations. I can't just—" "Is it me?" Marcus's voice climbed toward a shout. He'd never yelled at her. Never. "Is it because I'm a butcher? Because I don't have your education or your money?" "No, Marcus, no, it's not." "Then what? Explain it to me!" She fell silent, looking away. And that silence was the answer. Worse than any words. Marcus took a step toward her, then another. His hands clenched into fists, then opened. He grabbed her shoulders, too hard, too sudden. His fingers dug into the thin fabric of her dress, into the fragile bones beneath. "Look at me," he shook her, trying to break through the icy wall. "Claire, look at me." She raised her eyes, and there was no anger in them, only pure animal fear. Marcus froze, saw his reflection in her pupils, a huge, enraged man gripping a delicate woman. A monster. He released his fingers, stepped back so abruptly it was as if he'd been burned. Red marks from his grip remained on her shoulders. Claire pressed her palm to her throat, her breathing ragged. The chasm between them yawned wide and impassable. Marcus turned and walked to the door, without looking back, without saying a word. What could he say? Apologies wouldn't restore her trust. Explanations wouldn't change her decision. He stepped into the corridor, and the door closed behind him with a heavy, final click. The lobby greeted him with marble coolness and mirrors. Marcus approached the elevator, pressed the call button, left a damp fingerprint on the polished surface, stood staring at his multiple reflections in the mirrored walls. Dozens of Marcuses, all equally lost. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. The doors slid open soundlessly. Marcus stepped forward without looking and collided shoulder first with a man exiting. The impact was hard. Marcus stumbled, managed to grab the doorframe, lifted his eyes to see who he'd hit. Richard Garrett. The man from the photograph stood before him in the flesh. Impeccable navy suit, perfectly styled silver hair, the scent of expensive cologne. Older than in the picture, with a web of fine lines around pale blue eyes. Garrett didn't apologize, didn't step back. He simply stopped and looked at Marcus. The look was long, deliberate. It started at Marcus's face, traveled down to his cheap jacket, to his work boots, then returned. Assessing. Cold. Utterly devoid of emotion. Marcus could see how that gaze worked. Weighing, analyzing, finding weaknesses. In Garrett's eyes, he wasn't a person, but an object, an inconvenience, an insect under a magnifying glass. The look lasted no more than 3 seconds. Then Garrett walked past without even brushing his shoulder, heading toward Claire's apartment. His footsteps on the carpet were absolutely silent. Marcus stood watching his back, heard Garrett knock on the door, 3 short, commanding raps. Heard the door open. "Mr. Garrett." Claire's voice was quiet, submissive. The door closed. Marcus entered the elevator. The doors sealed shut, cutting him off from that world. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, at the broad face with its heavy jaw, at the hands hanging at his sides, large, rough, covered in scars. Honest hands, she'd said, but not clean enough for her world. The elevator descended, carrying him away from glass towers and white orchids, back to where he belonged, to the smell of blood and steel, to the cutting block and knives that carved truth from flesh, to a world where everything made sense because everything could be taken apart. The knife slipped. Marcus watched the boning blade skitter off its familiar path and slice across his left palm. A red line appeared on his skin, widening, becoming a stream. Drops fell onto the stainless steel table, heavy, crimson, alien. He froze, staring at his own blood. Not meat. His own. This never happened. 15 years of work. 15 years of perfect control. His hands were extensions of his will, tools he trusted absolutely. The knife cut flesh, separated bone from meat, divided the world into comprehensible parts. The knife didn't make mistakes. He did. Marcus set the boning knife down on the table. Metal clinked against steel, a thin, piercing note in the humming silence of the shop. He clamped his right hand over the cut, feeling hot moisture seeping between his fingers. There was no pain. Instead, cold, dull emptiness. The pork loin lay before him, half butchered. The cut ran crooked, uneven, tearing through fibers instead of following their natural structure. Sloppy work. Amateur. His father would have looked at this with contempt. Marcus turned and walked to the sink. His work boots struck heavily on the concrete floor. Ice-cold water burned the cut, and he clenched his teeth, watching red spirals swirl down the drain. His hands trembled. Not from pain. From the roaring in his head that hadn't stopped since the door to her apartment closed. He wiped his palm with a clean rag, wrapped it around the cut, and tied it tight. The white cloth instantly soaked through with red. Marcus returned to the table, picked up the knife, tried to continue working. The blade shook in his hand. He threw the knife at the block. The metal buried itself in the wood, sticking upright. Marcus stepped back once, then again, until his back hit the cold wall. For the first time in 15 years, he feared his own tool. The phone lay on the windowsill next to an old order notebook. Marcus approached, picked it up with his rough fingers. The screen glowed dimly in the gray morning light. He unlocked it, found her contact. Claire. One word. Nothing else. No photo. No emoji. He didn't know how to deal with all that. His finger hovered over the call button. How many times had he called already? 7? 10? He'd lost count. Every time, the same thing. Long, monotonous rings, then the cold, mechanical voice of voicemail. Marcus pressed the button. First ring. He imagined her phone vibrating somewhere in that sterile apartment. On the white couch. On the glass table. In her small hand. Second ring. She's looking at the screen, sees his name, decides not to answer. Third ring. Why? Fourth. Hi, you've reached Claire Harper. I'm sorry I can't take your call right now. Marcus disconnected without listening, threw the phone at the windowsill. It hit the frame and fell to the floor. Whether the screen cracked or not, he didn't care. Each ring was a brick. She was building a wall between them, brick by brick, call by call. High, impenetrable, cold. He clenched his fists. The cut on his palm throbbed, soaking the rag through. Blood dripped onto the concrete floor, forming small, dark puddles. The silence was deafening. It was louder than screams, louder than accusations. Silence meant he'd vanished from her world, ceased to exist. Ghost. Marcus closed his eyes. In the darkness beneath his lids, images unfolded. Claire sits on the white couch, Next to her, Richard Garrett in his impeccable suit. His hand rests on her shoulder. She doesn't pull away, doesn't remove that hand. She sits obediently, like an elegant doll. "We need to deal with the problem," Garrett says in his quiet, measured voice. "Yes, Mr. Garrett," she answers. "The problem. Him. Their child." The image shifted. A white clinic room. Claire lies on an examination table under blinding lamplight. A masked doctor leans over her. Mechanical instruments gleam with steel. Garrett stands by the window looking out at alpine meadows, indifferent and calm. Marcus opened his eyes. The room swam before him. He grabbed the edge of the table, trying to keep his balance. His grief was transforming into something dark, something poisonous. Pity for Claire mixed with rage. She's weak. She lets this man decide for her. She's a traitor. No. Marcus shook his head, driving away those thoughts. It's not her. It's Garrett. He's holding her, controlling her. She's a prisoner in a gilded cage. Or had she chosen that cage herself? The walls of the shop were closing in around him. The cold air became suffocating. The smell of blood unbearable. He couldn't stay here, couldn't stand at this block, hold a knife, pretend his world wasn't collapsing. Marcus ripped off his apron, threw it on the hook, grabbed his jacket. The truck keys jingled in his pocket. Action. He needed action. Inaction was strangling him, turning him into a powerless shadow. He had to see her, look into her eyes, hear the truth from her lips, not from his sick mind. The pickup started with a roar. Marcus floored the gas pedal, and the old engine howled like a wounded beast. He tore out of the shop's lot, leaving a trail of black exhaust behind. The city blurred past. Gray buildings, traffic, stoplights. He ignored them, ran red lights, passed on the wrong side. The honking of other drivers merged into a single wail. He didn't care. He wasn't driving to a date. He was driving to war. The alley behind the theater greeted him with dampness and the smell of rot. A dim yellow lamp above the service entrance cast trembling shadows on wet asphalt. Cigarette butts floated in puddles. Rats scurried along the wall. Marcus parked the truck at the end of the alley and walked toward the door. His heavy boots squelched on the damp pavement. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, clenching them into fists. The door swung open. Claire emerged first. She wore a long ivory cashmere coat, her hair pulled into a tight bun. Even in the alley's twilight, she glowed like a porcelain figurine in a dirty display window. Marcus took a step forward and froze. A figure emerged from the shadows behind Claire. Massive, silent. Paul, Garrett's driver. The same man he'd collided with in the elevator. His shaved head caught the lamplight. His face remained in shadow, carved from stone. Paul didn't speak, didn't threaten. He simply positioned himself between Marcus and Claire, becoming a wall of flesh and muscle. Claire stopped. Her eyes met Marcus's for an instant, frightened, pleading. Then she looked away and walked toward the black sedan parked at the opposite end of the alley. "Claire," Marcus forced out. Paul took one step forward, slow, unyielding. His silence spoke louder than words. "You don't belong here. She's not yours." Something clicked in Marcus's head. He lunged forward. The collision was brutal. Marcus rammed Paul with his shoulder, trying to knock him down. The bodyguard swayed, but held his ground. His hand shot up, caught Marcus by the jacket collar, and yanked down. Marcus doubled over, but managed to twist free. His fist crashed into Paul's ribs, once, twice, 3 times. Heavy, dull impacts. Paul didn't even flinch. He responded with a short, precise strike to the solar plexus. The air exploded from Marcus's lungs. He staggered. Paul moved to finish him, but Marcus threw his full weight against him, slamming the bodyguard into the wall. Paul's back hit brick with a thud. 1 second of advantage. Marcus stepped back, preparing to deliver the decisive blow, but Paul was faster. His fist came up from below, straight into Marcus's jaw. Marcus's head snapped back. Salt flooded his mouth. His split lip pulsed with pain. Somewhere at the edge of consciousness, he heard shouts. Passers-by, phone lights. Paul straightened, adjusting his suit. His face remained absolutely calm. Job done. Marcus spat blood onto the asphalt and turned. Claire was already in the sedan. The car pulled away, its taillights dissolving into dusk. He'd lost. The pickup rolled through the city without purpose. Marcus gripped the wheel with bloodied fingers, feeling his split lip throb. The taste of iron wouldn't fade. Where to go? Back to the shop? To his father, who would look at him with silent contempt and say, "I warned you." No. His hands turned the wheel on their own. The truck carried him through downtown, toward the glass towers of the luxury district, to her building. He parked across the street, in the shadow of a tree, killed the engine, and leaned back in the seat. Stared at the tall building, at the windows of her apartment on the top floor. The lights were on, warm, yellow, inviting. A mockery. Marcus sat watching, saw shadows moving behind the curtains. How much time passed? An hour? 2? He lost track. Couldn't go home. Couldn't leave. The pull of that light was stronger than his will. He had to know. What was happening in that gilded cage? What Garrett was saying to her? What she was answering? Marcus got out of the truck. Cold wind hit his face, but he didn't feel it. Crossed the street. Walked past the doorman, who this time didn't even glance at him. Rode the elevator up. The hallway was empty and quiet. Soft carpet absorbed the sound of his footsteps. Marcus moved toward her door like a sleepwalker, and stopped. The door was ajar. A thin sliver of light leaked into the corridor. He heard voices. Claire was speaking, quietly, brokenly, words drowning in sobs. "Can't, please." The second voice was calm, measured, merciless. "Calm down. It's already decided. Tomorrow morning you'll fly to Zurich. Everything's arranged. Richard Garrett." Marcus pressed against the wall, trying not to breathe. He couldn't make out the words clearly, but he heard the music of the conversation. Victim pleading, executioner passing sentence. "I thought..." "You didn't think anything. I think for both of us. You're my investment, Claire, and I won't let you devalue yourself."
"But the baby..."
"What baby?" Garrett's voice turned colder than ice. "A mistake. A biological accident. We'll correct it." Silence. "Do you understand me?" "Yes, Mr. Garrett." Marcus clenched his fists. Nails dug into his palms. The cut on his left hand opened again, blood seeping through the rag. He took a step toward the door. The lock clicked. The door slammed shut with a dry, final sound. Marcus froze. His heart pounded so loud it seemed they must hear it. Had they discovered him? Was Garrett sending him a message? Or had Claire cut off the last path, locked herself in with her tormentor willingly? The corridor became a trap. The walls shifted inward, the air thickened. He stepped back once, then again, until he bumped into the stairwell door. Instinct screamed to run, but stubbornness held him in place. Marcus hid in the stairwell, crouching in the corner. From here he could see her apartment door through the crack. Waited, counted heartbeats. Each second stretched into eternity. An hour passed. The lock clicked. The door opened. Richard Garrett emerged first, impeccable as always. He adjusted the cuffs of his pristine white shirt, smoothed the lapels of his suit. His face was absolutely calm, satisfied. Paul followed behind, a silent shadow. They walked to the elevator. The doors parted. They vanished. Marcus waited until the sound of the elevator faded completely, then emerged from hiding. His hand fell on the apartment door handle. He pushed. The door gave way. Claire sat on the white couch in the same position, bent over, arms wrapped around herself, face wet with tears, eyes empty, staring at nothing. She didn't turn, didn't cry out, as if she hadn't heard him enter. "Claire," Marcus whispered. She blinked, slowly turned her head, looked at him, but he wasn't sure she actually saw him. "Leave." Her voice was hollow. "I can't." "Leave, Marcus, before it's too late." He took a step into the room. His gaze fell on the glass coffee table. 2 white printouts lay on the gleaming surface. Plane tickets. Beside them, a glossy brochure. Marcus picked it up with trembling hands. Lakeside Clinic. A photograph of an alpine lake on the cover. Inside, images of sterile rooms, doctors in white coats, smiling patients. An elite Swiss clinic. He turned the brochure over. Service description in English. Confidential reproductive health procedure. Marcus looked at the tickets. Zurich. Tomorrow morning. 2 passengers. Claire Harper, Richard Garrett. The final gears clicked in his head. The picture came together. Clear, unyielding, monstrous. Garrett had arranged everything. Bought the tickets, booked the clinic. Tomorrow he would take Claire to Switzerland. There, in a sterile room beneath alpine skies, they would destroy his child. She'd agreed. She'd betrayed him. The brochure slipped from his hands, fell onto the table. "You're going," he said. Not a question, a statement. Claire didn't answer, just covered her face with her hands. Marcus turned and left. The door closed behind him softly, almost gently. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, closed his eyes. His world shattered into pieces. The brochure lay on the table before Marcus, like evidence at a crime scene. Lakeside Clinic. He stared at the photograph of the alpine lake on the cover, a perfect mirror of water reflecting a flawless sky. Inside, sterile rooms, doctors in white coats, smiling patients. Confidential reproductive health procedures. Marcus turned the page. Prices in Swiss francs. Terms of anonymity. Safety guarantees. He closed the brochure and opened it again, stared at it until the letters began to blur before his eyes. His mind refused to accept the obvious. Claire had agreed. She'd betrayed him. She'd chosen Garrett. No, Marcus shook his head, driving the thought away. Remembered her face, wet with tears, devastated. Her voice behind the closed door, quiet, frightened, pleading. Garrett's commanding tone, brooking no objection. "You're my investment, Claire, and I won't let you devalue yourself." The facts began rearranging themselves in his head, forming a new picture. More logical, more acceptable. She's being forced. She doesn't want to go to Zurich. Garrett decided for her. Bought the tickets, booked the clinic, constructed his perfect operation to eliminate the problem. She sat in her apartment, broken, crying, seeing no way out, a prisoner in a gilded cage. And he, Marcus, had left, abandoned her. Instead of saving her, he'd fled, crushed by his own pain. He clenched his fists. The cut on his left palm throbbed, reminding him of yesterday's loss of control. But now, control had returned. Cold, iron, ruthless. Marcus rose from the table, paced the room and back. His steps were heavy, determined. He was no longer a victim. He was a savior, the hero in this dark story. The plan formed itself, assembled from fragments of thoughts and instincts. Garrett would take Claire to the airport tomorrow morning. Flight to Zurich. 2 tickets. He planned to personally escort her, control every step, make sure his investment didn't escape. But Marcus would intercept them. Stop the car. Take Claire. Drive her somewhere Garrett would never find her. A simple plan. Direct. Forceful. He went to the kitchen, opened a drawer, pulled out an old road map, unfolded it on the table, smoothed the edges with his palms. The city spread before him in a network of lines and symbols. His finger traced the route from downtown to the airport. The main highway, wide, straight, jammed with morning traffic. Garrett's limousine would take that route. Prestigious. Comfortable. Predictable. Marcus knew other ways. Industrial zones on the outskirts. Bypass roads the drivers of expensive cars had never heard of. Shortcuts through concrete jungles known only to locals. He found the spot. A stretch of highway just after the exit from the Beltway. Narrow, squeezed between a tree line on the left and an old brick factory on the right. Nowhere to turn off. The perfect interception point. Marcus picked up a pencil, marked an X on the map, then a second, his route from the industrial side. Less distance, less time. He'd arrive early and wait. He set down the pencil and looked at his watch. 3 in the morning. Flight to Zurich, 9 a.m. Garrett would leave no later than 7 to make check-in. 6 hours to prepare. Marcus approached the old sideboard in the corner of the room. Crouched down, felt with his fingers for an inconspicuous gap in the floorboard, pried up the board, and it lifted with a quiet creak. Beneath it lay a tin tea box, tarnished with age. He pulled it out, set it on the table, opened the lid. Inside, neat stacks of bills bound with rubber bands. His savings. Everything he'd managed to set aside over years of working at the shop. Money for truck repairs. For new equipment for the shop. For a future he'd once vaguely imagined. Marcus dumped the bills onto the table, spread them in a fan. Counted. $3,200. Not a fortune, but enough. Fuel for a long drive. Food. A motel somewhere far from the city until things quieted down. New clothes for Claire. She couldn't run in what she was wearing. He stuffed the money into his jacket pockets without counting. The empty box remained on the table, open and useless. There was no going back. He'd burned the last bridge. Marcus walked to the corner of the room where his work bag sat. The leather was cracked with age, smelled of oil and iron. He opened it, pulled out the boning knife in its leather sheath. The blade was long, flexible, honed to razor sharpness. He ran his thumb along the flat of the steel. Cold. Perfect. Marcus didn't think of this knife as a weapon for killing. It was a tool. Surgical. To cut the bonds Garrett had wrapped around Claire. To free her with one precise movement. He tucked the knife into his jacket's inner pocket. The weight of steel against his heart was calming, gave him confidence. Marcus sat at the table, poured himself coffee from the old pot, black, thick, bitter. Drank it in one gulp, scalding himself. Poured another. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, counting down the seconds until dawn. He couldn't sleep. Didn't want to. Every time he closed his eyes, He saw her face, frightened, defenseless, waiting for rescue. Marcus stood, paced the room, stopped at the window. The city beyond the glass slept, submerged in pre-dawn darkness. Scattered streetlights flickered through the fog. Somewhere out there, downtown, in her glass tower, she wasn't sleeping either. Packing. Or sitting on the white couch, arms wrapped around herself, counting down the final hours to the inevitable. He returned to the table, spread out the map again, checked the route a third, a fourth time, memorized every turn, every intersection. The coffee ran out. Marcus brewed a fresh pot, drank, walked, sat, waited. By 5 a.m., his hands began to shake, not from fear but from excess caffeine and adrenaline. His face in the mirror above the sink was gray, eyes sunken, dark shadows beneath them. He looked like a man on the edge, because he was on the edge. At 5:30, Marcus left the house. Cold morning air hit his face, sobering. Fog lay over the asphalt in thick blankets. The city still slept. The pickup started on the first try. Marcus pulled out of the lot, heading for the Beltway. The road was empty, only trucks and the occasional taxi. He drove slowly, conserving time. Arrived at the spot an hour before Garrett's expected appearance. The stretch of highway looked even more deserted than on the map. To the left stretched a tree line, scraggly trees, bare branches in the fog. To the right rose an old brick factory, windows smashed, walls covered in graffiti. A dead place. Marcus pulled onto the shoulder, drove the pickup into the shadow of the trees, killed the engine. Silence crashed over him, ringing and dense. He leaned back in the seat, his gaze locked on the road. Hands rested on the wheel, gripping it until his knuckles turned white. Waiting was easier than thinking. The fog began to dissipate with the first rays of sun. The asphalt darkened, wet with dew. Somewhere in the distance came the rumble of an engine. A truck passed without slowing. Marcus didn't move. A predator in ambush. Minutes dragged. His breathing slowed, heart beat steadily. All the anger, all the pain of recent days compressed into a single point, a single goal. Save her. And then it appeared. The black limousine emerged from the fog like a phantom. The lacquered hood caught the morning light. The car moved slowly, confidently, unsuspecting danger. Marcus waited 1 second. 2, 3. The perfect moment. He turned the ignition key. The engine roared, shattering the morning silence. Marcus floored the gas pedal. The pickup lunged forward, shot onto the road, blocking the limousine's path. The shriek of brakes tore through the air. The limousine fishtailed, but the driver held control. It stopped a yard from the pickup's hood. Marcus burst from the cab. The limousine door flew open and Paul tumbled out. This time, without warnings. The bodyguard charged forward, fist aimed at Marcus's face. Marcus ducked, letting the blow sail past his head. His own fist shot forward, short, precise strike to the solar plexus. Paul doubled over, gasping for air. Marcus gave no respite. He struck again, liver, under the ribs, places where a blow inflicted maximum pain with minimum effort. His hands worked with the same precision he brought to breaking down carcasses. He could see the vulnerable points of the human body as clearly as he saw bones through meat. Paul tried to counter, but Marcus was faster. His foot struck sideways at the kneecap, a crack. The bodyguard collapsed onto the asphalt with a muffled groan. Marcus stood over him, breathing hard. His knuckles stung. Blood appeared on his lip again, the old wound reopened. He didn't care. He turned to the limousine, his heart hammered with anticipation. He'd defeated the Guardian, reached his objective. Now he'd open the door, and she'd be there. frightened, but saved. Marcus ran to the rear door, yanked the handle. The door swung open. "Claire, I'm here!" His voice tore from his chest, hoarse with strain. "I've come for you!" The interior greeted him with silence and the icy smile of Richard Garrett. He sat alone on the back seat, arms crossed over his chest. Impeccable suit, perfectly styled silver hair, face calm, almost bored. Claire wasn't there. The seat beside him was empty. Marcus froze, stared at the empty seat, at the luxurious leather upholstery, at nothing. Impressive performance. Garrett's voice was quiet and venomous, especially the finale, very dramatic. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "But you're too late, Butcher." Garrett slowly pulled a phone from his pocket. Claire left an hour ago, in a different car, by a different route. The words fell like hammer blows.